I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when a woman I had never seen before stopped beside my table and smiled like she already knew something about me. "Caleb?" she asked. I looked up, confused. She set her coffee down across from me without waiting for an invitation. Then she leaned in just enough to make the whole thing feel like a secret. "Your mom told me you've been looking for a girlfriend, so I thought I'd come introduce myself." For 3 full seconds I forgot how words worked. My mother had threatened to set me up before, but I had assumed she meant normal things. An awkward dinner, a phone number, maybe a suspiciously convenient invitation to a backyard barbecue. Not this. Not a beautiful stranger appearing at 8:30 on a Saturday morning with amused brown eyes and enough confidence to hijack my breakfast. Then she added, "Relax, I'm not here to propose." I figured coffee first would be more civilized. That was the moment my ordinary morning stopped being ordinary. If you enjoy slow-burn love stories where one bold conversation changes everything, like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, would you stay for coffee or run before your mother could plan the wedding? Her name was Sophie Bennett, and she was 25. I was 29, and, according to my mother, apparently one quiet Saturday away from becoming a permanent bachelor. "I need to call her," I said. Sophie lifted her cup. "You can, but she'll deny everything except the part where she described you as a good man who has forgotten how to have fun." I stared at her. That sounds exactly like my mother. I know. She said it 3 times. I should have been irritated. A year earlier, I would have been. 2 years before that, I definitely would have been. But Sophie had delivered the line with such shameless amusement that I laughed before I could stop myself. "There," she said, pointing at me. "That. She also said you don't do that enough. You've known me for 90 seconds, and you're already taking her side? I'm keeping an open mind." Very generous. She grinned and took a sip. "So how do you know her?" I asked. Sophie traced one finger around the cardboard sleeve on her cup. "The Eastwood Community Garden. Your mom volunteers there. I'm helping redesign the old greenhouse behind the main garden." I knew the place. My mother had spent the previous 2 months talking about a neglected brick greenhouse the neighborhood association wanted to restore before winter. "You're the landscape architect," I said. Sophie's eyebrows rose. "She mentioned me?" "She mentioned a brilliant young woman with actual taste who understands why nobody should paint old brick gray. I assumed you were 60. She pressed a hand to her chest. "That is the nicest thing anyone has ever said about me. You should hear what she says about gray vinyl flooring." "I have. It lasted 9 minutes. That made me laugh again. We talked for what I thought would be 10 minutes. It became 40. The bell over the door rang. A family came in, shaking rain from their jackets, and the coffee shop suddenly felt smaller. Sophie looked toward the window, then back at me. "Okay," she said. "I should confess something before this becomes too weird." "Before?" "Fair point." She folded her hands around her cup. "Your mom did tell me you were single. She also said she wished you'd meet someone naturally. But she didn't send me here." I blinked. "She didn't?" "No. I saw you through the window." "You knew what I looked like?" "She showed me a picture last week when we were talking about the greenhouse. Technically, she was showing me a deck you built for her, but you were standing in the corner holding a drill." I groaned. "Of course I was. And I recognized you." Sophie's smile turned slightly sheepish for the first time. "I was going to keep walking, then I thought about what she said, and I figured, why not? Worst case, I embarrass myself in front of a stranger and never come back to this coffee shop." "You came in because you were curious?" "Yes." "About me?" "Don't make me regret being honest." I leaned back. I'm trying not to look too pleased with myself. You're failing. I've had a surprising morning. So have I. Then her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced down and the expression on her face changed. Problem? I asked. Maybe. She opened the message, read it twice, then exhaled. The contractor who was supposed to inspect the greenhouse framing this morning just canceled. Again. I should have minded my own business. Instead, I asked, "What kind of framing?" She looked at me slowly. "No," I said immediately. That look is dangerous. What look? The one where you remember I work in construction. I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. Sophie tried to look innocent and failed almost as badly as I had. I was only going to ask one tiny question. There are no tiny construction questions. Would you be willing to look at an 80-year-old greenhouse for 20 minutes? I checked the time. And this has nothing to do with my mother? Absolutely not. Good. Although she will be there. I closed my eyes. Sophie laughed so hard she had to cover her mouth. I should have said no. Instead, 20 minutes later, I was following her car across town. I spent the next hour inspecting the greenhouse with Sophie while my mother wisely disappeared to weed the herb beds. The cancellation turned out to matter. One section of the roof frame had corrosion around an old repair, and the sill plate along the north wall had water damage. It wasn't an emergency, but it changed the project scope. Sophie followed me with a notebook, asking practical questions instead of pretending to understand things she didn't. "If we replace this section," she said, "can we preserve the original steel ribs?" "Most of them. I'd reinforce rather than replace unless the engineer says otherwise." Her face brightened. "That's what I was hoping." "You really hate tearing old things out." "I hate tearing out things that still have a story." I looked at her. She caught me staring. "What?" "Nothing. That was definitely a something." I crouched near the wall and tapped the brick with the handle of my screwdriver. "You sounded like me for a second." "That must be terrifying." "Deeply." By the time we finished, I had agreed to help with the restoration, which gave Sophie and me a very practical excuse to keep seeing each other. So when Sophie sat across from me the following Saturday at exactly 8:03, holding 2 coffees, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anticipation. "I guessed," she said, sliding 1 cup toward me. I looked at the label. Black coffee, 1 splash of cream. "You remembered? You ordered it last week." That's mildly unsettling. I'm an architect. Remembering tiny details is how I avoid expensive mistakes. Landscape architect. She narrowed her eyes. You're brave this morning. I've had coffee. You're welcome. I took the cup. Thank you. Then, because I wanted to know and because I was tired of pretending I didn't, I asked, "Did you really come back because of the greenhouse?" She looked at me over the rim of her cup. "No," she said. "I came back because I wanted to see you again." The answer was simple. The effect was not. Over the next few weeks, the greenhouse became our excuse to see each other twice a week, and Saturday coffee became something neither of us pretended was accidental. I wasn't trying to listen, but the greenhouse windows were open. "Yes, I saw the revised offer," she said. A pause. "No, I haven't decided yet. I understand the deadline. Monday is fine." When she came out, she was composed, but the easy energy she usually carried had tightened around the edges. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Work thing." I nodded. She looked at me like she knew I had heard enough to know there was more. "I got an offer from my old firm in Chicago," she said. My stomach dropped harder than it had any right to. "For what?" "Senior project designer. Better salary, more control. They want me to lead a waterfront redevelopment team." "That sounds big." "It is." "When would you go back?" If I say yes, 3 weeks. 3 weeks. The number landed between us. I set the boards down more carefully than necessary. Congratulations. Thanks. You don't sound excited. I am. Sort of. Sort of? She leaned against the brick wall. It's the kind of job I thought I wanted when I was 22. Big projects, big clients, a title that makes my student loans feel slightly less insulting. But being back here changed something. I waited. She looked through the open door toward the garden. I like designing things I can actually know. Spaces where I meet the people who will use them. My grandmother used to say you should plant for the person who comes after you. I forgot how much that mattered to me. So turn it down. She gave me a look. Easy for you to say. You asked. I did not. Fair. She smiled faintly, then looked down at her hands. I've also been thinking about starting a small studio here. Residential landscapes, community spaces, historic properties. But that's risky. Chicago is certain. And Madison isn't. Exactly. I understood that kind of decision. I understood it too well. What I didn't understand was why the thought of her leaving felt personal already. We had known each other less than a month. We weren't dating. Not officially. My mother had introduced an idea. Sophie had turned it into a joke. Everything after that had supposedly been two adults spending time together because they liked each other. But as she stood there talking about 3 weeks, I realized I had quietly started imagining a 4th Saturday, a 5th. Fall at the garden, dinner after work, her coffee cup beside mine. I had started assuming there would be more. That scared me enough to make me careful. Too careful. You should take the job if it's what you want, I said. Sophie looked at me for a long moment. I know, she said. Something in her voice told me I had answered a question she hadn't asked. After that, I noticed the distance before I admitted I had created it. Sophie still came to the greenhouse. She still brought coffee on Saturdays. She still teased me when I measured something twice, but there was a new restraint between us, as if both of us had reached for the same door and then politely stepped aside. A few days later, my mother surprised me with a confession. For what it's worth, I never told Sophie you were looking for a girlfriend. I stared at her. What? I said you were single. I said you worked too much. I may have said you needed to remember there was a life outside your shop. That is not what she told me. She was flirting with you, Caleb. The realization should not have surprised me. It did. My mother laughed at my face. Oh, sweetheart. Please never call me that while explaining that a woman was flirting with me. I'll put it on a list. I pointed toward the garden gate. Go volunteer somewhere else. She kissed my cheek and left smiling. That Saturday, Sophie was already at North Street when I arrived. She had chosen the table by the window where we first met. I sat down across from her. My mother confessed, I said. Sophie froze with her cup halfway to her mouth. Confessed what? She never told you I was looking for a girlfriend. Sophie slowly lowered the cup. I waited. Her cheeks turned pink. It was the first time I had ever seen her genuinely embarrassed. That, I said, enjoying myself far too much, is interesting. She covered her face with one hand. I can explain. Please do. She said you were single. Mm-hmm. And that you worked too much. Accurate. And that you hadn't seriously dated anyone in a while. Still not looking for a girlfriend. Sophie dropped her hand and glared at me, but she was fighting a smile. Improvised. You lied. I embellished. You walked up to a stranger and invented a maternal dating referral. It got me a seat. You could have said hello. That would have been terrifying. I laughed. That was your safer option? I panicked creatively. There was something so endearing about the admission that the last of my guardedness cracked. Why? I asked. Her smile faded into something more honest. Why what? Why did you come in? She looked through the window for a second, then back at me. Because your mother talked about you like you were someone she respected, not just someone she loved. There's a difference. I didn't speak. She told me about the deck you rebuilt after your dad hurt his back. She told me you drive to Milwaukee twice a month because your sister hates taking her car to mechanics alone. She told me you still use your grandfather's hand plane even though you own better tools. Sophie smiled faintly. Then I saw you sitting here by yourself, looking like you were personally offended by a blueberry muffin, and I got curious. I was not offended by the muffin. You were frowning at it. It was dry. See? I shook my head. Then she said, and yes, I thought you were handsome. That shut me up. Sophie leaned back, pleased. Finally. Finally what? I found the off switch. I looked at her across that little table and understood with sudden embarrassing clarity that I did not want to spend the next 3 weeks acting like this was casual because I was afraid of what came after. So I did the thing I should have done earlier. Go to dinner with me tonight. Her amusement disappeared. A real date? She asked. A real date. No greenhouse plans? No. No measuring tape? I make no promises. Caleb, fine, no measuring tape. She smiled slowly. Then yes. That night I took her to a small Italian place near the Capitol. We sat on the patio under strings of warm lights, and for once I didn't talk myself out of noticing everything I liked about her. The way she asked the server's name and used it when she said thank you. The way she closed her eyes for 1 second when she tasted something she loved. The way she told stories with her hands, the way she could move from teasing me to talking seriously without making either version of herself feel fake. Halfway through dinner, she asked about my work beyond the greenhouse. I told her I was considering buying a small warehouse on the east side and turning half of it into a proper furniture shop. Her eyes lit up. Why haven't you? Because it's a lot of money. You can afford it? Barely enough to make it scary. So you're deciding between the safe version of your career and the version you actually want. I stared at her. She stared back. Then we both laughed. That's annoying, I said. Extremely. Maybe we should stop giving each other advice. Agreed. We did not stop. After dinner, we walked toward the lake. The air was cool, and Sophie tucked her hands into the pockets of her jacket. I have to answer Chicago on Monday, she said. The sentence tightened something in my chest, but I didn't retreat this time. Do you know what you want? I know what I don't want. What's that? To make the decision because I'm scared. I nodded. That seems fair. She looked at me. What about you? The warehouse? Yeah. I don't want to spend 5 years telling myself I'm being responsible when I'm actually hiding. That also seems fair. We stopped near the railing overlooking the dark water. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Sophie said, I'm glad I walked into that coffee shop. I turned toward her. Even though your opening line was fraudulent? Especially because it was fraudulent. You have no remorse. None. She was smiling, but her eyes had gone quiet. I reached up and touched one strand of hair the wind had blown across her cheek. I gave her enough time to move away. She didn't. So I kissed her. It wasn't dramatic. There was no music, no rain, no crowd applauding somewhere behind us. It was slow and careful and real enough that when we pulled apart, I forgot the clever thing I had been about to say. Sophie smiled. There's that off switch again. I laughed against her forehead, and for the first time since I learned about Chicago, I let myself want something without immediately planning how to survive losing it. Monday came too fast. Sophie called me at 6:15 that evening while I was closing the shop. I answered them, she said. I sat on the edge of my workbench. And? I didn't take the original offer. I let out a breath I had no business holding. But they came back with another one, she continued. 6-month project contract. I'd lead the waterfront design phase, then walk away clean if I want. 3 days a week in Chicago, 2 remote. Better money than the full-time offer, no long-term commitment. That actually sounds good. I think it is. When would it start? 2 weeks. The relief I had felt rearranged itself. 2 weeks later, she would still live in Madison, but Monday through Wednesday nights she would be in Chicago. The project would be intense. Her weekends would partly belong to the greenhouse, her father, and whatever first clients she could find for the small studio she still wanted to build. There was nothing unreasonable about it. There was also no obvious place for a brand new relationship. Sophie was quiet on the phone. Say something, she said. I knew what I wanted to say. I wanted to say I hated the idea of losing 3 days a week before we had even figured out what we were. I wanted to say I had spent the entire day waiting for her call. I wanted to say I wanted more dinners, more Saturdays, more kisses by the lake, more ordinary time that didn't need a project attached to it. Instead, the old reflex won. It sounds like a smart compromise, I said. You should do it. There was a pause. Right, she said. I heard the change immediately. Sophie, no, you're right, it is. That's not what I meant. What did you mean? I stood and started pacing, as if movement could produce courage. I mean, I don't want you making a career decision around someone you met a month ago. I'm not. I know. Then why do you keep talking like I'm asking you for permission? I'm not trying to. Well, you are. I stopped. Her voice softened, but that somehow made it worse. Caleb, I don't need you to tell me what job to take. I know that. I need to know whether you actually want to be part of the equation at all. There it was. The question I had been avoiding because answering it would make the stakes real. I do, I said. Another pause. Then say that. I just did. No, you said it after I dragged it out of you. She wasn't wrong. I rubbed a hand over my face. I'm trying not to pressure you. And I'm trying not to guess what you feel. That's fair. I don't want safe answers, Caleb. I stared at the half-finished walnut cabinet in front of me. I'm scared, I said finally. Her breathing changed. Of me going? Of building something with someone whose life may be somewhere else. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Because of Lauren. Partly. Okay. I waited for reassurance. She didn't give it to me. Instead, she said, I'm sorry that happened. I really am. But I can't prove I'm different from her by making every choice she wouldn't make. The sentence hit exactly where it needed to. I know. And I don't want to become the test case for whether you can survive someone having ambitions that scare you. That's not what I'm doing. Maybe not on purpose. I closed my eyes. She took a breath. I like you. More than I expected to. But I need you to meet me as I am, not as the opposite of the woman who left. I want to. Then figure out what you want from me, not what you think is safest. We ended the call without a fight, but also without resolving anything. The next 2 days were the first time since the coffee shop that Sophie and I did not speak. I hated it. I also knew calling her just because I hated the silence would not fix what she had asked me to fix. So I worked. Not to avoid thinking this time. To think clearly. I drove past the warehouse I had been considering. I parked outside and sat in my truck for 20 minutes staring at the faded "For Sale" sign. My whole life I had treated certainty like a virtue. Measure twice, confirm the numbers, Know where the load goes before you remove a wall. In construction, caution kept people safe. In the rest of life, I had started using it as permission not to move. Sophie had not asked me to guarantee we would last. She had asked me to admit whether I wanted to try. Those were not the same thing. Thursday evening, I went to the greenhouse expecting to find half a dozen volunteers. Only Sophie was there. She stood on a short ladder near the south windows painting the new trim. Her hair was tied up and there was a streak of white paint on her cheek. She looked down when I entered. "Hey," she said. "Hey." I held up a paper bag. "Peace offering." "What is it?" "Fries." Her mouth twitched. "That's manipulative." "I learned from the best." She climbed down. We sat on the floor against the brick wall and ate fries out of the bag. For a few minutes we talked about the greenhouse. It felt absurdly formal. Finally, I put my food down. "You were right." Sophie looked at me. "About?" "I was giving you safe answers." She waited. "I kept thinking that if I never asked you for anything, then I couldn't become someone who held you back. But that also meant I wasn't giving you anything real to choose." Her expression softened. "I want you to take the contract if you want it," I said. "And I want to keep seeing you. Both things are true." She looked at her hands. "That's better." "I'm not done." A small smile. "Okay. I don't know what 6 months looks like. I don't know if we'll get tired of the drive or if your project will explode or if my work will. I don't know if this is going to become something permanent." Her eyes flickered and I realized I was still hiding behind uncertainty. So I corrected myself. "But I know I want the chance to find out." Sophie held my gaze. "That's what I needed," she said. I nodded. "I'm slow." I noticed. Cruel. Accurate. Then she reached over, wiped salt from my thumb with a napkin, and said, "For the record, I signed the contract this morning." I smiled. "Congratulations." "This time you mean it?" "I do." She smiled back. "Thank you." I kissed the white streak of paint on her cheek. "You missed," she said. "I know." Then she turned her face and kissed me properly. For the next 10 days we stopped pretending time would organize itself. We made plans. Later, when Sophie finally saw the plaque, she went quiet. I had carved the name of her grandmother, Evelyn Bennett, beneath a simple line drawing of a tomato vine. The association had already approved naming the central planting bench after her because she had volunteered there for 31 years. Sophie ran her fingers across the letters. "You remembered," she said. "Tiny details. Avoids expensive mistakes." She laughed once, but her eyes filled. "Hey," I said softly. "I'm okay." She pressed her lips together. She would have loved this. I stood beside her without trying to fix the emotion. After a moment, she leaned her head against my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. That was when I knew I was in trouble. Not because she might leave 3 days a week. Because I had stopped thinking of her as someone who might disappear and started thinking of her as someone I wanted to build around. The near loss didn't come from Chicago. It came from one stupid sentence. The community association held a small greenhouse reopening on the Sunday before Sophie's contract started. Nothing fancy. Folding tables, lemonade, donated pastries, kids painting flower pots, neighbors wandering through the restored space as if it had been brought back from the dead. Sophie stood near the entrance explaining the planting plan to an older couple. She wore a simple green dress under a denim jacket, and every few minutes someone stopped to thank her. I was proud of her in a way that surprised me with its intensity. My sister Hannah drove down from Milwaukee for the afternoon. She had heard enough about Sophie to insist on meeting her. Within 10 minutes, they were laughing together like they had already formed an alliance against me. "This is bad," I told Hannah when Sophie walked away to speak with a volunteer. "For you? Absolutely. You met her 8 minutes ago. That was enough." Then Hannah looked past me toward Sophie and smiled. "So, is she your girlfriend?" The answer should have been easy. I wanted it to be yes, but Sophie and I had never actually said the word. She was leaving for Chicago the next morning. Some stupid, cautious part of my brain decided that answering for both of us would be presumptuous. "We're figuring it out," I said. Hannah's expression changed. Not much. Enough. I turned. Sophie was standing 6 feet away with 2 cups of lemonade in her hands. She had heard me. She smiled anyway and handed 1 cup to Hannah. "There you are," she said. "Your mom is looking for you." Her tone was completely normal. That was worse. The rest of the afternoon passed without a scene. Sophie was warm, capable, gracious. She stood beside me when the association president thanked the volunteers. She squeezed my hand when they unveiled the plaque for her grandmother. She kissed my cheek when I helped carry the last folding table into storage. But when I walked her to her car, there was space between us. "Sophie?" She looked at me. "Yeah?" I should explain what I said to Hannah. "You don't have to. I think I do." She folded her arms loosely. "Okay. I wasn't denying you. I know. I just didn't want to call you something we haven't talked about." "That's fair." Her calmness made me nervous. "But," I asked. She looked down the street, then back at me. "But we've been seeing each other for weeks. We kiss, we talk every day. You met my dad. I know your sister. We've had conversations about how to make my work schedule fit with whatever this is." "I know. And apparently it's still figuring it out." The words weren't angry. They were tired. I stepped closer. "I care about you." "I know you do." "Then what are we arguing about?" "I'm not arguing." She took a breath. "I'm telling you that I can handle uncertainty about logistics. I can handle distance. I can handle a relationship that might not work. What I don't want is to keep investing in something that stays undefined because definition makes you nervous." I felt defensive for half a second. Then I remembered every careful answer I had given her. She continued, "I'm not asking for a promise that we'll get married. I'm not even asking you to know what 6 months from now looks like, but I need to know what you are choosing now. And if I don't?" Her eyes softened. "Then I need to stop behaving like your girlfriend when you don't know if you want one." There was the cost, real and immediate. "I do want one," I said. She gave me a sad little smile. "Caleb, you keep answering at the edge of losing me." That hurt because it was true. I don't want to force the answer out of you every time. I had no defense left. She touched my arm. "I have to be up at 5 tomorrow. I should go." I wanted to stop her. Instead, for once, I understood that the next thing I said needed to come from certainty, not panic. So I nodded. "Drive safe tomorrow." "I will." She got into her car and left. I stood on the curb until her taillights disappeared. My mother found me 10 minutes later inside the empty greenhouse, pretending to check a hinge. "She went home?" she asked. "Yeah." My mother looked at me for a moment. "Do you want me to stay out of it?" "Yes." "Okay." She started to leave. "Mom?" She turned. "Did you really think I needed a girlfriend?" Her expression softened. "No." That surprised me. "I thought you needed to stop living like wanting someone was a mistake." I looked down. She walked over and rested a hand on my shoulder. "There is no safe version of caring about people, Caleb. You know that." Then, because she knew when enough was enough, she left. I barely slept. At 4:30 Monday morning, I was in my kitchen making coffee. At 5:10, I was parked outside North Street Coffee, which did not open until 6. That presented a problem. So I drove to the 24-hour diner 3 blocks away, bought 2 coffees, discovered both were terrible, threw them out, and drove home to make 2 proper ones in travel cups. By 5:40, I was parked outside Sophie's apartment building. I did not go up. I texted her. "I'm downstairs. I know it's early. I need 5 minutes before you leave. If you don't want that, I'll go." 30 seconds passed. Then a minute. Then the lobby door opened. Sophie stepped outside wearing black pants, a navy coat, and the expression of a woman who had not expected to see me before sunrise. Her overnight bag was over one shoulder. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I held out the coffee. Her eyes dropped to it. "You made that?" "Yes." "What happened to North Street?" "Closed." "You came here before 6." "I had a scheduling issue." Despite herself, she smiled. "Good. I needed 1 second of that before I said the part that mattered. Sophie, I wasn't looking for a girlfriend that morning." Her smile faded. "I know." "No, let me finish." She nodded. "I wasn't looking for much of anything outside the life I already had. Work, family, my shop. Everything was controlled, predictable. Then you walked in, lied about my mother, stole my Saturday, dragged me to a greenhouse, stole my fries, and somehow became the person I want to call when something good happens." Her eyes shone, but she didn't interrupt. I kept thinking that if I refused to name this, I was protecting both of us from making promises too early. But all I was really doing was asking you to take the emotional risk while I kept 1 foot outside the door. I stepped closer. "I don't want 1 foot outside anymore." Sophie's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. "I want to be your boyfriend. I want you to be my girlfriend. I want to try this while you work in Chicago 3 days a week. I want Friday dinners when you're exhausted and Saturday coffee when you're not. I want to know what project made you angry and which client surprised you. I want you to tell me when I'm being too careful. I will probably deserve it." A tear slipped down her cheek. She laughed and wiped it away. "And I'm not asking you to stay," I said. "I'm asking if I can be part of the life you're already choosing." For a second, she just looked at me. Then she set the coffee on the hood of my truck, stepped forward, grabbed the front of my jacket, and kissed me. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "That was more than 5 minutes," she said. "I can leave." "Don't you dare," I laughed. "So?" I asked. "So what?" Was that a yes? She tilted her head. "You're going to make me say it?" "I've learned not to live in gray areas." Annoying. Accurate. She smiled wider. "Yes, Caleb, I'll be your girlfriend." I kissed her again. Then she picked up the coffee and took a sip. Her eyebrows rose. "You remembered." Black, 1 splash of cream. Tiny details. Avoids expensive mistakes. She laughed, and just like that, the parking lot before sunrise felt like the place where my life had finally become simple in the right way. The first month was not cinematic. It was better. 6 months after the morning she walked into my coffee shop, her Chicago contract ended. The firm offered to extend it. She declined. When she told me, I asked the question I had learned to ask instead of making assumptions. "Is that what you want?" She smiled. "Yes." "Then congratulations." "Thank you." Bennett Groundworks had enough projects to keep her in Madison full-time. She still took occasional consulting work in Chicago. I still worried sometimes when an opportunity took her somewhere new. She still worried sometimes that starting her own business had been reckless. The difference was that we said those things out loud. We stopped treating fear like evidence. One Saturday the following spring, almost exactly a year after we met, I arrived at North Street Coffee a few minutes early. The table by the window was open. I sat down with 2 cups. Sophie walked in at 8:03. Some things deserved consistency. She saw me, smiled, and crossed the room. Instead of taking the chair across from me, she sat beside me. "Morning," she said. "Morning." She looked at the second coffee. "You ordered for me?" I remembered. "I'm proud of you. I've grown." She took a sip, then leaned back against my shoulder. Sophie turned toward me with that same amused look she had worn the first morning. "You know," she said, "your mom told me you've been looking for a girlfriend." I groaned. "We are not doing this again." "She said you seem very serious about finding the right one." "She talks too much." "So I thought I'd come introduce myself." I looked at her. "Hi, I'm Caleb." "Sophie." "Are you always this forward with strange men?" "Only the handsome ones with dry muffins." I laughed, and she kissed my cheek. A year earlier I had walked into that coffee shop expecting nothing more than caffeine and an hour alone. I had thought my life was stable because nobody could disrupt it. Then a woman I didn't know sat across from me, told a ridiculous lie about my mother, and changed the direction of my morning. What changed my life was everything that came after. The second coffee, the greenhouse, the hard conversations, the miles between Madison and Chicago, the moments we stopped asking for certainty and started asking each other for honesty. I used to think the right relationship would feel safe because nothing could go wrong. Sophie taught me something better. The right relationship can feel safe because when something does go wrong, both people stay in the conversation. And every Saturday morning when she steals the better pastry off my plate and insists it belongs to her because we share an address now, I remember the first thing she ever said to me. My mother had not been looking for a girlfriend for me. I had not been looking for one either, but Sophie walked over anyway. And I'm grateful every day that I stayed for coffee. If this story reminded you that love sometimes begins with one brave, slightly ridiculous hello, share it with someone who still believes timing can surprise us. And tell me in the comments, would you have believed Sophie's opening line or caught the bluff immediately?